Trading is a great way of profiting on horse racing, regardless of whether you have knowledge of racing or not. You can profit regardless of who goes on to win the race and even before the race has started. The Cheltenham Festival is one of the biggest race meetings of the year. Over the course of Cheltenham Week, £100 million will be traded on the Betfair betting exchange. If you want to learn how to profit from that using tools like BetAngel, then please watch the rest of this video. Thank you for watching this video, which will continue in just a moment. If you want to watch more trading videos and learn how to win whatever the result, then click over here. If you would like to download a free trial of BetAngel so that you can trade, which you can do in practice mode so there's no risk to any money, then click over here. Thank you for watching the video. So it's Cheltenham Week. Everybody gets very excited at Cheltenham Week, probably because it means they can sell stuff, hospitality, free bets and all sorts of other stuff. But for the trading community, and for me in particular, it's always been a spectacular week and an opportunity to earn good sums of money. And this goes back over many years. So over the years that I've been trading Cheltenham, I have pulled out some spectacular results on an individual race basis and over the course of the day and over the course of the week. And Cheltenham holds a special place in the calendar because throughout a lot of the National Hunt season, over the jump season, you tend to find a lot of the racing is a bit here and there. There's some highlights throughout the winter, but generally winter tends to be a bit of a slog. And when Cheltenham comes round, that's the first opportunity that you have to really go for it. And all of the racing that takes place over that period of the year sort of gets focused into Cheltenham because you get loads of really good quality over the course of the whole week. And that generates an enormous amount of liquidity, turnover, and interest in the markets as well. So over the course of the week, you will find that Cheltenham will turn over, I estimate, this year, somewhere around £100 million. And that's an awful lot of money. If you divide it amongst all of the individual races, you're going to end up at a turnover on average per race of about 4 to 4.5 million. And to put some contrast into that, if you look at racing over the course of the entire year, the average race will turn over about 500,000. So it's 10 times as big as what you would normally see. Now last year the biggest races came in at about 8 million or so before the off. But some years, we've been up to 11 to 12 million per race. It all depends upon how much interest there is in the race, what price the runners are and stuff like that. But generally, the feature races are going to get somewhere between 8 to 12 million or thereabouts. And the racing on average will get about 4.5 million. Now, obviously that's graded according to the quality of the race, because the lower quality racing will have less interest. And the Gold Cup, for example, will have massive interest and a lot of betting activity on it. And that just makes for a very good market. But you tend to find that over the course of the day, it's the 20 past 3, the feature race of the day, that drives most of the liquidity. Now, typically, Cheltenham runs from Tuesday to Friday, and Tuesday is a day for me to sort of experiment a bit. You never quite know how it's going to behave from previous year. Incidentally, if you want to know how the market's behaved, check out the forum thread that we've got running, and I'll actually post up there charts from previous years so that you can actually look at what happened last year and get a feel for how the market is. Because what you tend to find when you get this level of quality is that the market behaves slightly differently. It just sort of slows down a little bit. If you're looking at a cellar at Wolverhampton in the middle of winter on a Thursday night, the market can be pretty bonkers. Whereas at Cheltenham, the market tends to slow down a bit and act a bit more decisively when it does move. So the markets, deserve a little bit of respect and they should be traded differently. But you tend to find that generally, not exclusively, but generally, the markets tend to be a little less volatile than you'd expect at other times of the year. So necessarily you adapt your style to take account of that. But, you can get a little bit of a move, and when you get the lower quality races, they can be sort of driven fairly strongly in one direction or the other. But overall, the markets do behave differently. Now, some people like them, some people don't like them. But if you can adapt your style, then you'll learn to love them, because Cheltenham is such a big meeting. And it's interesting because this really sort of kickstarts everything that goes on for the rest of the year. This is, we're getting into spring, and all of a sudden we can see the flat turf racing coming on the horizon. and we have Cheltenham, then we have the Aintree Grand National Meeting, then the Guineas, and then the Derby and the Oaks, then the Royal. You can see that pattern unfolding in front of you. But Cheltenham is a really big meeting and something that you should put a lot of focus on. Now, I've got a couple of other bits for you as well, which I wanted to discuss, which I'll just throw in for you. And when you look at the way that the markets behave, I've noticed that, for example, in play behaves slightly differently as well. I've made some notes here, which I'm just having a look at. But in play tends to behave slightly differently. So you get slightly less money in play at Cheltenham in terms of the overall mix. But the money in play tends to be much more decisive. So I've noticed when horses shorten, that naturally tends to be expected. So people are reading the market in much more depth. Basically, when the price in a horse shortens, it shortens and is more decisive. And only when it looks like the horse is definitely not going to win do the price go shooting out. But you tend to find, even if the running style of horse is well known, you tend to find, therefore, that what happens is if the horse doesn't get off to a good start, price won't drift that much. It's only when it's definitely not going to win will the price go flying off. But you also notice from a betting perspective that there's an influence within the market on the favourites. I had a look at the market from runner 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and kept going all the way down to the bottom. And what you tend to notice is that the favourites tend to get a little bit over bet. There's too much money on them, especially near the front of the field. And very often you find on Betfair that when the SP comes back from the market, the SP is as good as close to zero money lost to the other side as book as you could possibly get. And very often at Cheltenham, for some reason, you tend to find that the book is overbroke at SP. And that just sort of hints again that the favourites are getting backed too heavily. And therefore, you would tend to look at the favourites or the front of the field as a bit of a lay opportunity generally. Now, from a trading perspective, the fact that they're getting backed heavily means that the price is probably going to come in. But from a betting value perspective, they're probably a lay. I've run extensive stats on this, and what you tend to find is, in fact, when you get past runner 7 and you get into runner 8 and above, that tends to be where the value is. I looked at Dutching the whole of Cheltenham over many, many years, and what I found was if you ignore the front 7, the rest of the field win, or SP at rather, 2.81% of the entire field. So about just under 3%, 2.8% is what the market has the chance of those horses winning being priced at. However, if you actually backed them, they actually won 3.6% of the time. So that sounds like a tiny amount, but it's significant in terms of the odds and the level stake returns. And if you Dutch the back of the field, that will produce a very good result for you. So that's interesting to note. If we look at, I'm just looking at some of the other stats as well here, the turnover has generally been pretty strong over a large number of years. And that seems to be fairly consistent, and that's why I'm forecasting 100 million on the Cheltenham markets this year. But if you're doing in running and you're pursuing a lay the field strategy of some sort, I've broken down what happened in the last 10 years worth of Cheltenham to figure out if there is some sort of pattern of behaviour there. And what you tend to find is if you're looking at where the favourite is actually at a reasonable price, and by reasonable price we're sort of talking around 4s or 5s and so on, you tend to find that if you can get something priced 3s to 5s, those are the ones that tend to move the most in running. So if you're looking to lay something under 2 or lay something under 3, or multiple horses during a particular race, you tend to find that horses trade as low as 3 more frequently than they do at a low of 2, and that's probably a characteristic coming out from what I said just a few seconds ago. But in 2015 there were 45 horses out of 468 that I looked at that traded at 3 or lower in running. 2014 there were 48, 47, 52, 57, so you can see that's where the sort of sweet spot in the market is. If you go down to as low as 2, it's not so successful. You get less than half of the amount that tends to trade at 3 in running, which is interesting. But you also tend to see that this occurs in the bigger fields. So looking at the smaller fields tends to be less effective. You need to look at much bigger fields. And basically competitive handicaps is what it's saying. So if you're looking at runners where the favourite's priced at 3 to 5, and it's sort of 15 to 20 runners, those tend to be the ones to target for strategies where the outcome is uncertain, which sort of makes sense, really. Competitive handicap, big field at big prices. That sort of makes sense. But like I said before, my focus is very much on Cheltenham because that's sort of what makes or breaks March for me. If I have a good week at Cheltenham, I can do much more during that week than I can throughout the rest of March. And it's a good opportunity to get stuck in. If you've never done it before, it's a good opportunity to learn ahead of the Aintree Grand National meeting. And if you are used to, the biggest piece of advice that I would give to you is if you're used to all of the standard markets that we've been seeing throughout the winter, Cheltenham is nothing like that. So even if you are sort of teetering about whether you should get involved or not, I suggest that you actually do get involved. One of the big frustrations for me about Cheltenham is that I get invited there every year and I've declined Cheltenham every year. That's just one of those unfortunate things. And maybe one day I'll get to go. I keep saying, well, maybe next year. But for the moment, I'm going to be sat on this side of the desk, actively trading it and trying to do the best that I can. And I suggest you do too. So with that, I'd like to wish you the best of luck for Cheltenham Week. If you're interested in learning more about BetAngel, its tools and the opportunities they present, then why not visit betangel.com today and download a free trial.